Clara Whitfield heard her own name spoken, as if it were a coin dropped into a gaming bowl. She had stepped behind the baize curtain at Francese's long room, only because the lace at her cuff had torn on a nail. Beyond the curtain, candlelight trembled over pewter cups, carved chairbacks, polished shoe buckles, and the easy laughter of men who believed New York belonged to whoever could afford to speak first. The room smelled of pipe smoke, wet wool, Madeira, and the river beyond Pearl Street, where masts rocked black against the November sky. Then a young merchant said, £5, says Nathaniel Vale, cannot bring the printer's daughter to the assembly at the Stadt Huis without losing every respectable supper invitation in town before Candlemas. The laughter came quickly. Clara stood very still. One hand closed around the torn cuff. She knew the voice that answered. Most of English New York knew it. Nathaniel Vale, eldest son of a family whose sloops carried flour, beaver skins, rum, and letters between New York, Boston, Barbados, and London, moved through the town as if every doorway had been built in expectation of his hand. He had a sober coat, a measured smile, a pew in Trinity Church, warehouses near the East River, and the kind of name that made magistrates lower their voices before disagreeing with him. £5 is a poor price for courage, Nathaniel said. Make it 10, and I will not only escort Miss Whitfield, I will stand up with her for the first country dance. Someone tapped the table with delight. A second voice, older and colder, said, Careful, Vale. Her brother waits in the fort jail on a charge of theft. A gentleman may flirt with pity, but he should not bring scandal on his sleeve. No one spoke of pity, Nathaniel replied too lightly. The laughter sharpened. Clara did not cry, she did not flee. Shame rose into her throat, hot enough to choke her, then hardened into something cleaner. Her father had taught her that type was useless until it was locked into a chase. Loose letters scattered, fixed letters struck. She pulled the curtain aside. The small circle of gentlemen turned as one. Nathaniel Vale's amusement died first. Beside him stood Captain Silas Morley, alderman of the North Ward, church benefactor, militia officer, and the man whose sworn statement had helped place Clara's brother Matthew in irons. Morley held his cup as if even surprise must wait upon his permission. Clara looked at the silver and paper notes on the table between them. Mr. Vale, she said, if you are selling my dignity, I suggest you ask for more. No one laughed then. Nathaniel straightened. Miss Whitfield, you accepted a wager to escort me to an assembly, she said. I accept your offer, but I name the terms. You will escort me not because I am sport for idle men, but because I require entry to rooms where liars grow careless. You will introduce me to Recorder Jonathan Bayard before the evening is finished. You will stand witness while I ask Captain Morley 3 questions in public, and you will not speak over me unless I ask you to. Morley's eyes narrowed. This is insolence. Clara turned to him. No, sir. Insolence is ruining an honest apprentice because you believed grief had made his sister harmless. Nathaniel's face changed by the smallest degree. He was no longer embarrassed. He was listening. Clara placed her torn cuff on the table beside the wager. £10, she said quietly. We'll pay for paper, counsel, and enough ink to trouble a coward. Decide, gentlemen, whether you wagered on my humiliation or your own. If stories of quiet women, dangerous rooms, and the moment pride becomes evidence pull you in, like the video and subscribe to Quiet Fires of America, where the underestimated do not always raise their voices before they change the verdict. Until that night in 1696, Clara Whitfield had believed survival was a narrow art. Her father, Elias Whitfield, had kept a modest printing room off Pearl Street, close enough to the East River that tar, salt, fish, and damp rope drifted through the paper stacks whenever the wind came in from the slips. He printed shipping notices, auction bills, church sermons, ordinances for the mayor's court, blank bonds for customs duties, and sometimes political sheets under names that were not the author's own. He had taught Clara to set type before she could properly braid her hair. Letters, he said, were small soldiers. Put them in the right order, lock them tight, ink them clean, and they could march farther than any man. Then fever took him in the winter, and debt came in the spring. Within 3 months, the Whitfield press was sealed by order of the mayor's court, for arrears claimed by men who had praised Elias when he was useful. Within 6, Matthew Whitfield, 17 years old and proud enough to look calm while frightened, was accused of stealing a packet of customs bonds from the counting room of Deputy Collector Gideon Harwood. The bonds had been found beneath a loose board in the room Matthew shared above a cooper's shop near the water. 2 clerks swore he had lingered near Harwood's strong chest. A watchman swore he had seen him hurry down Dock Street after midnight. Captain Morley swore he had warned Harwood that the Whitfield boy had been asking questions beyond his station. The town called it common theft. Clara knew better, not because she yet had proof, but because Matthew had come to her the night before his arrest with ink on his cuffs and terror in his face. "Father's job books," he had whispered. "Clara, someone used our mark on forms we never printed. Harwood's ledger says father supplied bonds after he was dead." By morning, Matthew was behind the palisades of Fort James. For weeks, Clara carried petitions from office to office until her shoes split at the soles. Clerks told her to wait. Attorneys asked for fees. Magistrates praised her father's memory and then remembered urgent business. Men who had once sent servants to beg Elias for a notice by sunrise now looked through Clara as if she had become part of the wall. So when Mistress Anne Keane, a widow who still owed Elias Whitfield kindness, offered Clara a plain gown and a place among the serving companions at Frances's gathering, Clara accepted for one reason only. Captain Morley would be there. Recorder Bayard might be there. Deputy Collector Harwood drank more than wisdom allowed. Men who would not receive her in daylight might betray themselves after wine. She had not expected Nathaniel Vale. He came to the Whitfield rooms the next afternoon, without sending a boy ahead. Clara found him at the foot of the narrow stair, hat in hand, rain silvering the shoulders of his dark coat. He looked less polished in daylight, though not less composed. Behind him, Pearl Street groaned with carts, apprentices, sailors, enslaved porters carrying barrels, Dutch wives bargaining in 2 languages, and wet horses stamping in the mud. "Miss Whitfield," he said, "I have come to apologize for accepting the wager or for being overheard." Color touched his cheek. "For both, though the first deserves more shame." "Shame is plentiful, Mr. Vale. Useful action is rarer." His mouth almost curved, then did not. "Then let me be useful. I spoke with Recorder Bayard this morning. He will not receive you officially, but he will attend the assembly in the great room of the Stadthuis in 3 nights. Morley will be there. So will Harwood." Clara opened the door wider. "Come up." The room above the shuttered print shop was cold and orderly. Her father's composing sticks lay wrapped in cloth. The locked cases had been marked by the court, but Clara had saved 3 job books before the seal was fixed. 1693, 1694, and 1695, brown with handling, tied in faded blue tape. She had hidden them beneath a loose hearthstone, because her father had trusted paper more than men. Nathaniel looked at the books. "Your father kept copies of every job?" "My father kept everything. He did not trust memory where money was concerned." "And you believe these clear your brother?" I believe they frightened someone enough to ruin him. Clara set the first job book on the table. Nathaniel removed his gloves. The gesture altered the room. Men like him did not usually dirty their hands in other people's accounts. They worked until the rain stopped. At first, Clara despised the ease with which Nathaniel understood doors. He knew which customs clerk gambled at Lovelace's tavern, which alderman owed Morley for a militia appointment, which merchant resented Harwood's fees, and which magistrate disliked being reminded that Governor Fletcher's favor could become a chain. But Nathaniel did not take command. He asked questions and wrote answers. When Clara pointed out a discrepancy between a printed customs bond and the paper stock her father had actually purchased, Nathaniel did not simplify her thought or claim it as his own. "Say it again," he said. Clara tapped the page. "Harwood's account says father printed 2,000 blank customs bonds in March. Father died in February. The paper order for March is for sermon sheets and shipping bills only. Nothing with the watermark required for bonds. Yet the duplicate receipt carries our shop mark. See the damaged tail on the W? That mark comes from an old proof block. Father threw aside months before he died. Someone took it and used it after the court sealed the shop." Nathaniel bent closer. "So someone used Whitfield's name to make false bonds look lawful." "Not only lawful," Clara said, "profitable. Look here." The bond numbers are later entered as paid by merchants whose ships never unloaded the goods named. Phantom cargo, false duty papers, real fees collected and vanished. Matthew saw one column. That was enough. "How much money?" Clara's hand rested flat on the book. "Enough that no one would hesitate to bury a boy." By the second evening, Nathaniel brought harbor entries copied from a friendly clerk at the custom house. By the third, Clara had built a chain across the table. False print orders, forged shop marks, blank bonds entered after her father's death, duty receipts tied to cargo that never existed, and payments passed through a counting house connected to Morley's brother-in-law in Albany. Matthew had seen one corner of it and paid for seeing. Their bargain changed in the hours between lamplighting and dawn. Nathaniel told Clara that one of his father's sloops had benefited from Harwood's softened inspections. "If this breaks," he said, "the Vale name will be dragged into the street. My mother will say, 'I have set fire to my own roof.'" Clara looked up from the figures. "Then why continue?" "Because I accepted a wager on your humiliation and found you standing in the ruins of a crime," he said. "A man should not need nobler reasons to stop being contemptible." It was the first answer she had liked from him, but liking him did not make her careless. On the morning before the assembly, Clara sent Nathaniel away and followed the evidence herself. She wrapped her hair in a plain cap, borrowed Mistress Kane's brown cloak, and went to the shop of Abel Pike, a woodcutter and engraver off Stone Street, who had once cut small ornaments for Elias. Pike's apprentice tried to bar her, but Clara placed 2 pennies on the bench and asked to see the rejects box. "For kindling," she said. The boy shrugged and left her to the shavings. Clara found nothing at first but broken rosettes, cracked borders, and a saint's hand split from a church plate. Then, beneath a strip of walnut, she saw the tail of a W. It was not her father's discarded block. It was its twin. Abel Pike had cut a second Whitfield mark. Clara's fingers went cold. A stolen block meant opportunity. A copied mark meant intention. She wrapped the sliver in cloth and left by the back door, just as Pike himself entered from the front, speaking in a low voice to one of Harwood's clerks. She did not run until she reached the corner. Even then she ran only because the clerk followed. Pearl Street blurred with rain and mud. Clara slipped once near a cartwheel, caught herself against a barrel, and heard boots behind her. She could have turned toward Trinity, where respectable people might see her. Instead, she turned toward the print shop, because the job books were there, and because fear, if allowed to choose the road, would always choose surrender. Nathaniel was waiting in the doorway. One glance at her face ended every polite question. He stepped past her, blocking the stare. The clerk stopped short. "Mr. Vale," the man said, breathing hard. "I have business with Miss Whitfield." "Then write it down and bring a witness," Nathaniel said. The clerk looked from Nathaniel to Clara. "Some women mistake old paper for safety." Clara held up the wrapped sliver. "And some clerks mistake a copied mark for a dead man's silence. Tell Mr. Harwood I shall bring this to the assembly." The clerk's mouth tightened. For one moment Clara saw the danger plainly. Not insult, not gossip. Men with money could arrange a fall on wet stairs, a missing book, a brother found hanging from a beam and called despair. Nathaniel saw it too. That night he urged her to give the papers to Bayard privately. "So he may bury them quietly if Morley frightens him?" Clara asked. "So you are not standing alone when they strike back?" "I have stood alone for weeks. It did not kill me. It might yet." The anger in his voice surprised them both. Clara softened only a little. "Then stand near me, Mr. Vale. Not before me. Near me." On the night of the Stott Huys assembly, Clara wore a plain dove-gray gown altered from Mistress Kane's younger days. She had no jewels except her mother's small garnet cross, dark as dried blood at her throat. Nathaniel met her beneath the torchlight, at the entrance, where English merchants, Dutch families, officers, widows, daughters, and churchmen climbed the steps, pretending not to stare. The room noticed them immediately. It noticed the printer's daughter on the arm of a veil. It noticed Captain Morley stop speaking mid-sentence beside the hearth. It noticed Deputy Collector Harwood turn pale, then recover too quickly. It noticed Recorder Bayard's frown and Mistress Vale's rigid mouth across the room. It noticed because good society always notices what it later claims not to have seen. Nathaniel bowed. "Miss Whitfield, may I have the first dance?" "You may have the first minute," Clara said. "Then take me to the recorder." He obeyed. Bayard tried to refuse her with weary politeness. Clara gave him no room for it. "Sir, my brother's hearing begins Monday. If he is condemned on forged evidence, the fault will not belong to poverty. It will belong to every man who was warned and looked away." Bayard stiffened. "Young woman, I have job books, paper orders, witness contradictions, a copied shop mark, and the name of the counting house through which false customs bonds were paid. I also have Mr. Vale, who will swear that I presented this before half the town saw me ignored." Nathaniel said only, "I will." That was all she had asked of him. Captain Morley approached before Bayard could answer. He wore black wool, a fine lace cravat, and a charitable smile so practiced it might have been printed from a plate. "Miss Whitfield," he said, "grief has made you theatrical." Clara turned slowly. Around them, conversation thinned. A fiddler faltered and found his tune again. "Captain Morley," she said, "did you visit my father's print room on the 3rd day of April?" His smile held. "I visited many tradesmen." "Did you instruct Deputy Harwood to enter 2,000 blank customs bonds under my father's name?" "Customs business is not suitable for a room full of ladies. Then perhaps theft is. You found it suitable when you accused my brother before 2 clerks and a constable." A murmur moved through the room. Morley's eyes hardened. "Take care." Clara withdrew a folded sheet from her reticule. "This is my father's job book. The bond order charged under his name bears a forged shop mark. This," she opened the cloth and held up the sliver of engraved wood, "is the copied mark cut after his death. The man who cut it was Abel Pike. The man who paid for it used Harwood's clerk as messenger. Harwood shifted near the punch bowl. Nathaniel moved once, not forward, but sideways, placing himself where Harwood would have to pass him to leave. Clara continued, voice steady. The false bonds correspond to cargo entries for casks of sugar and indigo that never touched the New York docks. The fees were collected. The duties were marked satisfied. The money passed through Van Bruggen Low and returned in notes to men who now call my brother thief. Morley laughed softly. It was a dangerous sound. And you intend to prove a conspiracy of customs officers and aldermen with a dead printer's books and a wood chip? No, Clara said, with your engraver. The doors opened. Abel Pike entered between two watchmen, gray-faced and shaking. Nathaniel had not found him alone. Clara had gone first to Pike's wife, who kept the household accounts, and knew exactly when her husband had been paid too much by men he feared. Clara had shown her the copied mark named Harwood, named Morley, and promised that silence would leave Pike to hang alone when powerful men needed a scapegoat. Mistress Pike had given Clara the receipt hidden beneath a flour bin. Nathaniel had then supplied the watchman and the legal weight of his name. Pike had supplied the fear. Bayard took one look at him and understood that the assembly had become a court. Pike's confession did not come nobly. It came in pieces, under pressure, in the withdrawing room, while half the town pretended not to listen from the passage. He admitted to cutting the second Whitfield mark. He admitted to stamping receipts under Harwood's direction. He admitted that false customs bonds had been entered against imaginary cargo and cleared through friendly accounts, he admitted. Matthew Whitfield had seen altered numbers in Harwood's ledger and said he would tell Clara. Then Harwood broke. Morley did not. Men like Morley did not collapse when first exposed. He demanded counsel. He accused Pike of malice, Harwood of weakness, Clara of feminine spite, and Nathaniel of romantic stupidity. He reminded Bayard of militia subscriptions, church repairs, poor widows' firewood, and every soft garment corruption wears in public. But he made one mistake. He turned to Clara and said, "Your brother should have kept his eyes on his copying." The room heard it. So did Recorder Bayard. Matthew Whitfield was released 2 days later. He came out of Fort James thinner, bruised at one cheekbone, and trying very hard not to tremble. Clara held him in the muddy street, while carts rattled past, and Nathaniel stood at a distance, hat in hand, giving them the privacy poverty is so often denied. The charge was dismissed before the mayor's court. Harwood was taken into custody. Pike testified. Morley's accounts were seized slowly, reluctantly. Under pressure, no magistrate could now pretend not to feel. By spring, the same town that had called Matthew a thief read the word fraud beside Morley's name in black type, large enough for sailors to read at 5 paces. Clara did not let anyone else print the whole truth. With the wager money, Nathaniel insisted, had become hers the moment he lost his honor over it. And with restitution from the first seized accounts, she paid the arrears on her father's shop. On a bright April morning, the court seal was cut from the door of Whitfield Printing. Dust lay thick on the cases. A spider had built a kingdom between the tympan and the frisket. Matthew cried when he touched the press. Clara did not. She rolled up her sleeves. The first sheet they printed bore no ornament, no apology, and no borrowed authority. A true account of false customs bonds, the Whitfield case, and the public men who profited from both. Below it appeared her name, Clara Whitfield, printer. Nathaniel read the proof in silence. "It will make enemies," he said at last. "It already has. It may make more. Then we shall need more paper." He smiled then, not the polished smile of long rooms and assemblies, but something tired and true. "We?" Clara examined the line of type where Morley's name sat locked between fact and consequence. "You know ships, customs men, and cowards," she said. "I know ink, ledgers, and the price of silence. If you can endure not being the hero of every room, Mr. Vale, you may be useful." "I am learning," he said. In the months that followed, people came to the little shop off Pearl Street quietly at first. A widow whose soldier husband's pay had vanished into fees. A free black carpenter charged twice for a license he had already purchased. A Dutch baker fined for an ordinance no one could produce. A sailor's wife whose dead husband's mark had been forged on a debt paper. Clara listened. Matthew copied. Nathaniel traced accounts through merchants who had once welcomed him without question, and now feared the sound of his boots on their thresholds. Not every case could be won. Not every thief wore a name society was willing to surrender. But each printed sheet made silence harder to sell. At the next winter assembly, Clara Whitfield entered no room as a wager. She entered because 2 aldermen lowered their eyes when she passed, because Recorder Bayard now read every customs paper twice, because New York had learned that a printer's daughter could turn ledgers into a blade, and because Nathaniel Vale, standing beside her, understood the honor of not standing in front of her. Silas Morley saw them from across the room. His trial had not yet finished. Powerful men knew how to delay ruin, but delay was not escape. Clara met his stare without smiling. Once, men had gambled on whether she could survive their laughter. Now they calculated what she might print next.